You know, um, when you think about how a skyscraper is built, there's this expectation of just, well, raw, unforgiving physics.
Right,
You
absolutely.
lay down this massive foundation of concrete, you rivet heavy steel beams together, and if you ignore the laws of gravity, just because, I don't know, they feel too harsh.
Or because you just wish they were different.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If you do that, the whole thing just collapses. It's binary. It either stands or it falls.
Mm-hmm.
Gravity doesn't really care about your intentions.
Yeah, engineering is fundamentally immune to sentiment. The steel doesn't care about your feelings, and, the concrete doesn't negotiate.
It really doesn't. And when you try to build something enduring, you just have to respect the physical reality of the materials you're working with. Which brings us perfectly into the world of modern storytelling for today's deep dive. But real quick, before we jump in, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the show so you never miss out on these explorations.
Yes, definitely like and subscribe. So, regarding that structural integrity you mentioned, our source material today argues that in modern storytelling, that integrity has been completely compromised.
Yeah, the argument here is that the steel of classic narrative has basically been replaced with the papier-mâché of modern ideology.
Which is quite the image.
It really is.
Okay.
Today, we are reviewing a highly provocative new ebook published in 2025. It's titled Masculine Writer's Blueprint: Crafting Stories That Empower and Inspire, written by Conrad Riker.
And this is where we need to hook you, the listener, right into the core of what this book is trying to do.
Exactly, because if you want to understand the history of our institutions before they were captured by feminists and Marxists.
Right, the landscape before all that happened.
Yeah, and if you want to learn how to write stories that actually fight back, you need this book. You need to check Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy it, and you should definitely follow the author at Conrad Riker at Substack.
The pitch Riker makes is entirely unapologetic. It's tailored specifically for a men's rights activist and red-pilled manosphere audience.
Very much so.
The central promise here is that you can learn to write this hyper-masculine fiction that completely bypasses woke gatekeepers and, make serious money while doing it.
And most importantly, taps into what the author views as undeniable biological truths. But before we take a single step further, we have a mandatory neutrality disclaimer that we really must explicitly state for you guys.
Right, this is crucial. The material we are covering today is highly politically charged.
Extremely. So we want to make it abundantly clear to you, the listener, that we are not endorsing these viewpoints. We are not taking any sides here.
No sides at all. We are not validating the politics of this content either.
Exactly. Our role here is simply to impartially report and analyze the ideas, the claims, and, the tactical strategies contained in Riker's original source material.
Purely analytical. That is our mission today. We are going to deconstruct Riker's blueprint for what he calls narrative warfare.
Narrative warfare, yeah. We'll examine his specific claims regarding biology versus ideology in storytelling.
And we'll look really closely at the guerrilla marketing tactics he advocates for dominating the self-publishing market.
Right. So let's just jump right into part one. Riker's core premise is that modern storytelling didn't just naturally evolve to where it is today.
Right, he doesn't think it was an organic shift.
Not at all. He claims it was actively sabotaged. He argues that cultural Marxists essentially hijacked the foundational myths of our civilization.
Taking these archetypes that have survived for millennia and just systematically dismantling them to serve a modern political agenda.
Yeah, and he provides some very vivid examples of this perceived hijacking to kind of illustrate his point.
He does. He looks at classic archetypal heroes and argues they've been totally inverted. Like, in his view, modern storytellers have taken a hero like Odysseus.
A man defined by cunning and martial prowess, right?
Exactly, and turned him into, well, in Riker's words, a whining activist.
Oh, wow. And he mentions Thor, too, doesn't he?
Yeah, Thor, a literal god of thunder and war. Riker claims they've neutered him into a punchline or a sensitivity coach.
It's a harsh critique. He even says characters like Hercules are now expected to apologize for their labors.
Right, framing historical feats as expressions of toxic masculinity.
He argues that publishers and studios have basically been convinced by these progressive echo chambers that stories about unyielding men are problematic.
Men who conquer, protect, and sacrifice without needing a therapy session afterward. The industry sees them as relics, according to Riker.
But Riker's response to that industry consensus is just a resounding rejection. And he uses this incredible historical anecdote to set the baseline for what he calls the ultimate standard of masculinity.
The Shackleton Standard.
Yes, the Shackleton Standard. Walk us through that, because it's pretty wild.
Well, it's about the 1914 Antarctic expedition led by Ernest Shackleton. It's a masterclass in establishing tone, and Riker uses it brilliantly as a framing device.
Because the recruitment ad, right?
Exactly. He points out that Shackleton's recruitment ad in the London newspapers was brutally, almost comically honest about the reality of the situation.
What did it actually say?
It read, "Men wanted for hazardous journey. Low wages, bitter cold, long hours of complete darkness. Safe return doubtful. Honor and recognition in event of success."
Safe return doubtful. I mean, could you imagine posting that on LinkedIn today?
Oh, modern human resources departments would instantly flag that advertisement. They'd say it promotes a toxic workplace or fails to provide psychological safety.
Right, they'd shut it down immediately.
But Riker focuses on the result of that brutal honesty. 28 incredibly tough, highly motivated men signed up specifically because of the challenge.
The challenge was the selling point.
Exactly. And the historical record really backs up the efficacy of his approach. I mean, when their ship, the Endurance, was crushed by pack ice.
Leaving them stranded in literally one of the most hostile environments on Earth.
Right. Shackleton didn't host a grief circle to process their feelings of loss.
He didn't sit them down to talk about their trauma.
No, he declared that optimism is true moral courage. And then he led his men on an impossible 720-mile ocean trek in a tiny lifeboat across the Drake Passage just to find rescue.
And every single man survived. It's unbelievable.
It is. So if we apply this to the mechanics of writing a novel, Riker is essentially saying that real men don't process trauma in the way modern therapy culture dictates.
They don't process it, they conquer it.
Yes, they conquer it. He's drawing a hard line against the current trend in literature where protagonists spend hundreds of pages just ruminating on their internal wounds.
So he compares Shackleton's survival to modern corporate retreats where adults sob during team building exercises.
He's telling his readers, your characters need to face hardship like a physical challenge to be overcome, not an emotional crisis to be unpacked.
And it's not just historical anecdotes, right? He anchors this whole argument in biology.
Evolutionary hardwiring, that's his main pillar. He cites a Cambridge University study which found that 92% of male mammals across various species engage in status-driven risk-taking behavior.
92%. I mean, that's not just some cultural artifact. That's a massive cross-species biological imperative.
Absolutely. And Riker argues this is basically the biological cheat code for writers.
How so?
Well, whether you're looking at baboons challenging alphas in a troop hierarchy or, Wall Street day traders risking their entire life savings on highly volatile meme stocks.
Same energy, basically.
Exactly. Riker claims this behavior stems from the exact same evolutionary hardware. So if you want to write a compelling story for a male audience, your hero shouldn't be a sensitivity-trained, drone-reciting therapy mantras.
They need to be driven by that evolutionary need to take massive risks.
For status, territory, and survival, he uses the U.S. Navy SEALs to really hammer this concept home.
Oh, the Hell Week part.
Right, looking at the 90% attrition rate during Hell Week. Riker mentions the supposed SEAL internal mantra used during the most grueling physical tests.
Which was, the moment you quit, your daughter's hamster dies.
Yeah, that's the one. And he says this isn't cruelty, it's evolutionary triage. Biology actively rewards men who can gamify their suffering to conquer obstacles.
So he is drawing a direct line between the biological imperative of survival and what audiences actually want to pay money to see on a screen or read in a book.
He points out that Hollywood's unspoken rule, the one that actually drives global revenue, despite what cultural critics might say, is that audiences fundamentally crave primal triumph, not televised therapy sessions.
Okay, so if this biological hardwiring is as absolute as Riker claims, we should definitely see it reflected in the one place where human behavior is undeniable, right? How people spend their money.
The box office.
Exactly, the box office. Let's look at his analysis of Die Hard.
Oh, the John McClane example is perfect.
Right, when Bruce Willis grunts his famous yippee-ki-yay line before dropping explosives down an elevator shaft.
Riker claims that audiences' testosterone levels spiked so high during screenings that lab technicians had to recalibrate their biometric equipment.
Which, whether that's hyperbole or literal, his point is that this isn't just screenwriting genius, it's evolutionary programming.
The mechanism behind this is just fascinating. Riker argues that male brains literally light up when John McClane walks barefoot through shattered glass to save his estranged wife.
Because it's not just about the action.
No, it's about enduring physical agony to protect the tribe. Riker argues that 200,000 years of brutal natural selection have hardwired men to deeply respect those who solve complex existential problems with bloodied fists and sheer willpower.
Rather than through diplomacy or sensitivity training.
Exactly. And he points to Top Gun. Maverick grossing $1.4 billion is ultimate proof of this.
1.4 billion. That is a massive number.
Men paid huge amounts of money to watch Tom Cruise cheat physics, defy aging, and execute a mathematically impossible combat mission.
And he compares that success to other franchises, right?
Yeah, he views the Disney Star Wars sequels or Marvel's Captain Marvel as comparative cultural failures, and precisely because they ignore this biological reality in favor of ideological messaging.
He actually says the Star Wars sequels failed to capture the male imagination because they swapped Luke Skywalker's legacy of martial heroism for what he calls a lactation fetish.
Referring to that bizarre scene in The Last Jedi.
Right. And he claims Captain Marvel needed corporate-sponsored free snacks to pack theaters.
Right.
Because the protagonist was entirely unearned in her power.
It's highly polemical language, for sure. But it serves his core thesis regarding the mechanics of audience engagement.
Does he have data for the movie stuff too?
He does. He cites a 2022 study from the Journal of Evolutionary Cinematography, which proved that male-led, highly successful films average 2.3 times more explosions than their counterparts.
2.3 times.
And he asks the reader to consider why. The answer he provides is that CGI fireballs and practical effects trigger the exact same primal reward circuits in the male brain as witnessing the conquest of a rival tribe in a prehistoric setting.
Okay, I'm trying to wrap my head around the logical conclusion of his argument here. If modern storytelling is treating audiences like patients in a therapy session,
Right.
is Riker suggesting that the ultimate cure is just raw, unfiltered adrenaline? I mean, it sounds like he's proposing an evolutionary triage for literature, where anything that doesn't spike a reader's heart rate is just dead weight.
That is an incredibly accurate way to synthesize his point. He is absolutely suggesting an evolutionary triage.
Oh.
He explicitly tells writers that if your protagonist's idea of demonstrating courage involves a tearful confession to a supporting character, you need to throw the script in the trash.
Just toss it out completely.
Literally, he instructs writers to highlight their hero's cringe therapy speak and delete it. Replace it with the ethos of Shackleton's leadership manual.
So only the ruthless, action-oriented, physically consequential narratives survive this triage process.
Exactly.
So if the box office is the ultimate polygraph test for what audiences actually want, we have to talk about Zack Snyder's film 300. Riker points to it as the gold standard for this biological storytelling.
He notes that the movie made $456 million globally, which is massive for an R-rated, hyper-violent historical fantasy.
Massive. But the financial success is almost secondary to the physiological impact, according to Riker, isn't it?
It is. He cites a Johns Hopkins study claiming that watching those specific stylized Spartan battle scenes spiked men's testosterone levels by 29%.
29%, that is wild.
The idea that a narrative can literally alter a viewer or reader's biochemistry just through the depiction of hyper-competent violence and masculine sacrifice.
It's crazy. And he compares that to the Charlie's Angels reboot.
Yes, he uses that endocrinological data to contrast 300 with the 2019 Charlie's Angels reboot. He dismisses that film as estrogen-drenched, pointing out that it flatlined at a mere $73 million at the box office.
So for Riker, this isn't a matter of subjective taste.
No, it's cold biological math. He points out that Gerard Butler's famous This Is Sparta scene, where he kicks a Persian messenger down a well for demanding submission, might have sent modern feminist critics into a frenzy.
And it resonated so deeply with audiences that they gave it an 89% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Compared to the all-female Ghostbusters remake, sitting at a dismal 49%.
As Riker famously quips in the book, even Rotten Tomatoes can't rot math.
Right.
But this neutering of ancient mythology isn't just happening in Hollywood studios, according to Riker. It's happening in traditional publishing, too.
Oh, heavily. He takes aim at Madeline Miller's wildly popular novel Circe, which reimagines Greek mythology.
How does he critique that one?
He critiques it for turning Odysseus into what he specifically calls a sniveling simp.
Ouch.
He argues that in Miller's reimagining, Odysseus is portrayed as a man who would rather see around discussing his complex feelings than sacking cities and outsmarting gods.
And Riker claims that despite the industry accolades, this kind of ideological fan fiction will ultimately sell a fraction of Homer's original epics over time.
Because it lacks the structural steel we talked about earlier.
He also shares that fascinating anecdote about the college student, right?
The 2023 college student who attempted to rewrite the Iliad as a modern sensitivity training manual.
Yes, where Achilles literally weeps over misgendering pronouns.
And Agamemnon pauses the Trojan War to lead a consent workshop.
And Riker points out this manuscript got 27 rejections from publishers, even within an industry he believes is desperate for that kind of content.
Because even the most ideologically driven publishers recognize that forcing modern political sensibilities onto ancient primal templates completely breaks the machinery of the story.
It just doesn't work.
No. Riker points to the Epic of Gilgamesh, which has endured in human consciousness for 4,000 years. He analyzes the core emotional beat.
When his friend Enkidu dies.
Right, when Enkidu dies, Gilgamesh doesn't retreat to a safe space. He doesn't process his grief through dialogue.
He gets moving.
The narrative gives us raw, unadulterated grief that instantly drives Gilgamesh on a dangerous physical hunt across the known world to find the secret of eternal life.
And he mentions Beowulf, too.
When a monster attacks his hall, Beowulf doesn't seek to understand the systemic inequalities that led to Grendel's aggression.
No, he rips Grendel's arm off with his bare hands and uses it as a bloody doorstop.
Exactly.
This connects to a massive modern cultural phenomenon that Riker sees as a direct continuation of this ancient dominance-based mythology, the rise of Jordan Peterson.
This is a crucial load-bearing pillar in Riker's blueprint. He looks at the explosion of Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life and his famous, often mocked lobster hierarchy metaphor.
Which people criticized heavily.
But Riker claims that critics completely miss the point. Peterson didn't just write a quirky self-help book. He inadvertently tapped into a primal script that men have subconsciously followed since the Spartans.
The fundamental idea that hierarchy equals order, not oppression.
Exactly. Riker notes the demographic reality here. 80% of Peterson's massive readership are men.
So when Peterson tells these young men to clean their rooms,
Riker analyzes the subtext of that. He says Peterson isn't selling a domestic platitude. He is weaponizing responsibility.
interesting, weaponizing responsibility.
He's telling young, disaffected men to conquer their immediate domain as the first step to conquering the world. Riker argues that Peterson's readers aren't interested in reading Marxist theory about dismantling systems.
They are instinctively trying to live out Darwinian reality.
Right.
Riker actually makes that contrast with Marxism incredibly explicit, doesn't he? He compares the enduring popularity of Joseph Campbell's work to Karl Marx's theories.
He points out the commercial reality that Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces, which is the seminal text on the monomyth and the hero's journey, has outsold Karl Marx's Communist Manifesto by a staggering 10-to-1 margin globally.
10-to-1, that's huge.
And his reasoning for this disparity is perhaps the most memorable line in the entire source text. He says, "Dragons eat dialectics for breakfast."
Dragons eat dialectics for breakfast. I absolutely love that imagery.
It's very evocative.
It perfectly encapsulates why storytelling works. Marx offers a bureaucratic, hyper-intellectualized snooze fest about class struggle and economic theory.
While Campbell offers the primal scream of slaying a literal fire-breathing dragon to save the village.
One appeals to the prefrontal cortex of a graduate student. The other appeals to the amygdala of every human being on Earth.
Riker even notes the historical irony that Soviet censors, for all their power, couldn't suppress the fundamental appeal of the hero tale within their own borders.
Even in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, he points out a 1984 Soviet animated film that blatantly ripped off Campbell's monomyth structure, circumventing communist ideology entirely.
Because, as Riker bluntly states, gulags make lousy story structure.
People fundamentally need dragons to slay, not committees to join.
Okay, so we have thoroughly established the what. According to Riker, readers demand biological, primal, dragon-slaying heroes who conquer trauma rather than process it.
Right.
But how does this translate to the actual keyboard? How does Riker say these stories must be written on a mechanical, line-by-line level?
He calls this methodology Spartan prose and dialogue daggers.
Spartan prose, I like that. So
Yeah.
what does that look like?
He advocates for an extreme form of lean writing. Riker says that on a grammatical level, authors must prioritize action verbs over emotional adjectives.
And once again, he brings physiological data to the table for this, doesn't he?
He cites 2023 biometric tracking data from Amazon Kindle, which found that paragraphs densely packed with action verbs actually spike male readers' heart rates by an average of 22%.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that. Why would a specific part of speech alter a reader's heart rate?
It has to do with how the brain simulates reality during reading. A 2021 study by Cambridge neuroscientists proved that when male subjects read verb-driven narratives, the motor cortex of their brains literally lights up.
So they are simulating the physical action described on the page.
Exactly. Riker's rule is that men are neurologically wired to do, not to debate. Adjectives and adverbs just slow down the cognitive processing of the sentence.
He has a great quote about adjectives, right?
In his words, adjectives are just participation trophies for weak verbs.
That's hilarious. And he gives a very practical example of this editing process, right?
Yes. He tells writers, take a passive adjective-heavy phrase like, he was strong, and completely grout it.
Wrote it, right.
Change it to an active, verb-heavy sentence, he deadlifted the coffin.
Think about the difference in cognitive load and visual impact there. He was strong requires the reader to invent a scenario where strength is displayed, which is vague and low energy.
Very vague.
But he deadlifted the coffin is visceral. It replaces a soggy observation with a concrete, slightly macabre action that instantly paints a picture of physical power and grim circumstances.
He calls this extreme linguistic efficiency the Terminator 2 effect.
I love this example because it highlights the power of omission. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the undisputed star of Terminator 2, one of the greatest action masterpieces ever put to film, spoke a total of just 78 words in the entire movie.
78 words. Riker uses that word count to establish a golden rule for his readers. Men will instinctively skip paragraphs that are over 3 sentences long.
Over 3 sentences and they're out.
He cites data from the writing assistant software Grammarly from 2022 to back this up, showing a massive drop-off in male reading comprehension and retention when faced with block text.
So you really have to keep it brief.
His advice is to approach sentence structure like you are diffusing a bomb. You must ruthlessly cut the blue wire of emotional reflection and keep the red wire of forward-moving action.
This connects deeply to what he calls the Hemingway standard. Ernest Hemingway has always been the patron saint of masculine prose.
But Riker weaponizes him against modern academia.
Right. How does he do that?
He contrasts Hemingway's blunt, virile prose, pointing to the elegance of a simple sentence like, "The sun also rises," with the bloated, deliberately confusing, jargon-heavy language of what he calls Marxist academics.
He gives a really specific example of this academic speak, right?
Yeah.
Some horrifying amalgamation of buzzwords.
Yes, he uses the phrase heteronormative cisgender liminalities.
It just rolls right off the tongue.
Doesn't it? Riker quips that the difference between these two writing styles is stark. One of them is used to secure funding for obscure gender studies conferences.
And the other?
The other funds whiskey and generational wealth.
That's a great line.
He urges writers to ruthlessly hunt down and slaughter filler words like very, really, and quite. He even mentions Stephen King's famous editing rule of slashing 10% of your total word count on the second draft.
But Riker takes it a step further, doesn't he?
He says that if you successfully cut 5,000 words of emotional exposition from a manuscript, there is simply no room left for soy.
Soy! Which is such a specific internet culture insult to use in a writing manual, but it perfectly signals who he's writing this for.
It absolutely does.
But here's a structural question for you. What about when characters actually have to speak to each other? Especially if the hero is forced to confront the specific ideologies Riker opposes.
Right, if they can't use long paragraphs or emotional debate, how do they win the argument?
Exactly. This is where he introduces what he calls the laughter siege tactic.
This is a fascinating inversion of traditional debate tactics. Instead of having your masculine hero sit down and formally debate the merits of woke ideology,
Which Riker argues only validates the opponent's premise anyway.
precisely, he advises authors to weaponize humor. The goal is to frame feminist or Marxist systems not as dangerous threats to be argued with, but as inherently absurd constructs to be mocked.
I'm trying to picture how that actually works on the page.
Yeah.
If I'm writing a scene where the hero confronts a university professor pushing critical theory, Riker is saying, I shouldn't have my hero deliver a 3-page monologue about individualism.
No, absolutely not.
I should have the professor do something humiliating.
Yes, you create a visual gag that undermines their authority. He says, picture a blue-haired academic tripping over a massive, heavy Oxford dictionary while mid-rant about the patriarchy.
That's very visual.
He advises authors to flood the narrative zone with ridicule. He compares modern cultural Marxism to a loud vegan at a high-end steakhouse.
Okay, a loud vegan at a steakhouse.
Right. They are whining, perpetually unsatisfied, and hell-bent on ruining everyone else's meal. You don't debate the vegan about the ethics of meat consumption.
You just laugh,
Yeah,
order your steak rare, and let their own misery be the punchline.
exactly.
So it's about psychological dominance. Don't debate them on the merits, just laugh at them, make them the punchline,
Yes.
and the audience will instinctively side with the character who holds the frame of amusement.
Rather than the character who is visibly upset.
Right.
But Riker offers a very crucial caveat to this tactic. You must always aim upward. Mock the systems, the institutions, and the enforcers of the ideology, not the everyday victims of it.
He uses a very specific example regarding marriage for this, right?
He does. He says a line of dialogue like, "Divorce courts are the temple of gynocracy." Lands incredibly well with his target audience because it attacks a massive, powerful institution.
But you shouldn't just attack individuals.
Right, a blanket, bitter statement like, "all ex-wives are gold diggers," doesn't work. It sounds petty, it lacks systemic critique, and it makes the hero look like a victim complaining about his personal life.
Which violates the Shackleton standard of conquering rather than complaining.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the next logical progression. If the lean prose is the weapon and the mocking dialogue is the dagger, who exactly is the target? Who is the villain in these stories?
Riker has a very specific idea of who the modern antagonist should be to maximize audience engagement.
Let's hear it.
He argues that the cultural landscape has shifted so dramatically that the best villains are no longer supernatural monsters or mustache-twirling tyrants.
So who are they?
For a modern male audience, the most visceral, hateable villains are the people who exert control through bureaucracy. We're talking about effete academics, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI compliance officers, and middle management bureaucrats.
Bureaucrats. He uses Hans Gruber from Die Hard and Agent Smith from The Matrix as the prime historical examples of this shift. Why is bureaucracy the modern dragon?
Because bureaucracy represents the suffocation of individual agency, which is the core of masculine anxiety. Riker quotes the economist Milton Friedman, who famously quipped that socialism only works in the Arctic where everyone dies anyway.
Okay, so how does that map to Hans Gruber?
Riker maps that concept of sterile, deadly control onto Hans Gruber. Think about it, a Eurotrash bureaucrat in a $5,000 suit who quotes obscure magazines while executing hostages and stealing bearer bonds.
Gruber isn't a physical match for McLean.
No, his evil is in his sophisticated, cold detachment. Similarly, Agent Smith is terrifyingly effective because he doesn't scream or rage. He adjusts his tie and asks, "Why, Mr. Anderson? Why do you persist?"
Rather than asking you to check his privilege.
Right, Smith is the ultimate enforcer of the system.
Riker even gives his readers a specific homework assignment for subverting expectations with villains, and it's just pure internet culture warfare.
It's a very telling exercise in narrative framing. He tells his writers to imagine rewriting Voldemort from the Harry Potter series. But instead of a dark wizard who uses unforgivable curses, rewrite him as a Hogwarts DEI consultant.
So instead of screaming Avada Kedavra, the villain's ultimate weapon is canceling the Quidditch tournament because it promotes toxic competitiveness and unequal outcomes.
Exactly. Riker claims that a post detailing this exact concept on the anonymous message board 4chan garnered 200,000 shares almost instantly.
200,000? That's insane.
His analysis is that men instinctively recognize this archetype. They recognize that real evil in their everyday lives isn't a snake-faced wizard trying to conquer the world. It's a smiling HR bureaucrat who replaces merit and glory with guilt and compliance.
And he has another highly visual scene he suggests too, right?
Yeah, he suggests writing a moment where a grizzled military sergeant uses a literal flamethrower, prominently labeled accountability, to burn a stack of critical race theory or CRT textbook.
It is pure, unadulterated cultural war translated into plot mechanics. And Riker says this type of specific, ideologically targeted conflict acts as pure dopamine for the male brain.
Yes. And he advocates heavily for what he calls military-style plotting to deliver that dopamine. He formally names it the ops plan method.
Walk me through that. How does a writer structure a novel like a military operation?
Well, Riker recounts a story of a former Green Beret who allegedly wrote a 300-page, highly successful thriller in just 3 days.
3 days? How is that even possible?
Riker claims the secret wasn't literary genius. It was treating the plot structure like a literal military operations order. Every single chapter serves as a mission briefing.
So no meandering exposition?
None. The inciting incident isn't a misunderstood conversation. It is enemy contact. The climax of the novel isn't an emotional realization. It is objective secured.
So you literally structure the pacing of the book like an invasion force moving through hostile territory.
Yes. And the data he points to supports the commercial viability of this. He cites Amazon 2023 sales data claiming that 94% of self-published books written by former Special Forces operators sell better than critically acclaimed literary fiction.
94%.
He references Jocko Willink's massively successful book, Extreme Ownership, as a psychological model for how to pace a story. The buildup of tension is your team meticulously moving through a dark building.
And the resolution.
The resolution of the chapter is the tactical debriefing with the bullet shells still warm on the floor.
Riker says every battle scene you write using this method floods the male brain with dopamine,
Rewarding a neural pathway that has been wired through millennia to solve complex problems through force, strategy, and teamwork.
which transitions us perfectly into what is arguably the most intense and controversial application of Riker's worldview to modern life. We are moving from fictional villains to what Riker sees as real-world systemic villains.
This is a major section. He dedicates a massive portion of the book to what he calls institutions captured, specifically focusing on family courts.
Now, keeping strictly to our mission of impartial reporting on the text here, Riker asserts that modern fiction is complicit in pushing romantic myths that ultimately lead men into financial ruin. He views the modern institution of marriage, and specifically the family court system, not as a partnership, but as a trap.
A trap meticulously designed to extract resources from men.
Right. And he shares a real-world case study about this that is fascinating purely from a marketing and audience capture perspective. He talks about a divorced Ohio welder who bypassed the traditional publishing system entirely and just struck gold.
Let's dig into the economics of that because it's wild. This welder self-published a book with the highly provocative title, Escape the Marriage Plantation.
That title alone is meant to start a fire.
Absolutely. And according to Riker's breakdown of the launch, this man sold 50,000 copies of his book without a literary agent, without a publishing house, and without a marketing budget.
How did he do it?
He did it using nothing but a cracked iPhone and a series of rage-fueled TikTok rants dissecting the inequities of family courts.
Wow.
He didn't even use Amazon at first. He just put a Venmo link in his bio and mailed the books himself.
Just mailed them himself. And Riker says his secret to this massive conversion rate was that he spoke truth to simps. But why did that specific demographic respond to a Venmo link on TikTok rather than walking into a Barnes & Noble?
Because the medium matched the message. Riker uses this case study to prove that there is a massive, highly motivated, and entirely underserved market of men who feel financially castrated and legally unprotected.
And they aren't going to traditional bookstores.
No, these men aren't browsing the fiction aisles of traditional bookstores because they feel those institutions hate them. By using TikTok and Venmo, the welder made purchasing the book feel like a subversive act.
Like they were part of a resistance.
Exactly. Riker advises his writers to weaponize the real-world statistics surrounding divorce to fuel their fictional plots and tap into this exact demographic.
What he chillingly refers to as the cold math.
Right, the cold math. Riker claims that in the modern legal system, men forfeit 80% of their assets in 72% of all divorces.
Those numbers are staggering.
He also cites a U.S. Census 2022 figure suggesting that 72% of divorced men now view prenuptial agreements as essential as oxygen masks on a crashing plane.
So he tells writers to stop inventing fantasy villains and start using these stats.
If you are writing a thriller, he argues, don't make the final boss a cartoonish supervillain trying to laser the moon. Make the final boss a shark-eyed, impeccably dressed divorce attorney whose child support demands could bankrupt a small sovereign nation.
He even suggests a movie tagline for this exact plot, doesn't he?
Yes, alimony or alive.
Which, I mean, is undeniably catchy.
It really is. He points to the film John Wick to illustrate how audience sympathies actually work here. Everyone thinks John Wick is a movie about a man avenging his murdered dog.
But Riker disagrees.
Riker points to a poll indicating that 94% of men would gladly burn down a Russian crime syndicate over a dead dog, but wouldn't lift a single finger to help pay an ex-wife's exorbitant alimony demands.
So for Riker, the dog in John Wick is a symbol of uncomplicated, pure loyalty.
And he contrasts this with his view of modern marriage, which he describes as a rigged game where women are legally incentivized to remove pieces from the board until everything falls apart, and then ask the court for half of the burning wreckage.
I have to ask about the psychology of this marketing strategy. How does Riker use these deep-seated, terrifying fears about institutional capture, specifically regarding the legal system or marriage, to create such highly motivated consumers? Why does fear sell so well to this specific group?
Well, he expertly taps into a profound sense of systemic injustice. By framing institutions like family courts, academia, and corporate HR as explicitly hostile and predatory toward men.
He's validating their anger.
Yes, and he creates a narrative where buying his recommended style of books, reading them, and applying their lessons is an actual act of rebellion.
It transforms the reader from a passive consumer of entertainment into an active participant in a cultural resistance movement.
The books cease to be mere fiction, they become survival manuals for hostile territory.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most actionable section of the book, crushing the gatekeeper's guerrilla publishing tactics.
Right.
Because if a writer actually follows this blueprint, if they write a book filled with Spartan prose, viral anti-DEI villains, and anti-marriage themes, traditional publishers in New York are going to reject it before they even finish the first chapter.
Oh, without a doubt.
Riker knows this.
Yeah.
So how does he advise authors to actually get these controversial books into the hands of the readers who want them?
He essentially declares the complete and total death of traditional publishing.
He references a leaked internal memo, right?
Yes, a memo from HarperCollins that allegedly demanded authors ensure their male characters cry by Act 2 in order to meet modern emotional intelligence standards.
And he dismisses the entire traditional publishing industry as a vegan buffet, all kale and no steak, focused entirely on meeting DEI quotas rather than entertaining readers.
Because he views the system as entirely captured, he insists that writers must bypass New York editors entirely. And he draws a very dramatic historical parallel to explain how to do this. He calls it Samizdat 2.0.
For those who might not know the history, Samizdat was the system used by Soviet dissidents during the Cold War.
Exactly. When the Soviet state controlled all printing presses, dissidents secretly mimeographed banned texts, carbon copied them by hand, and traded them in back alleys at immense personal risk.
So Riker claims that modern masculine writers face a similar, albeit digital, form of censorship.
He says today's cultural rebels must use alternative platforms, things like Rumble, Telegram, Gab, Substack, and Gumroad, to smuggle literature past the progressive gatekeepers who control Amazon's front page in traditional bookstores.
He mentions the controversial figure Milo Yiannopoulos, too.
Who once called private Telegram groups the new speakeasies for forbidden thoughts.
Riker talks about the specific mechanics of this underground economy, right?
He does. He advises partnering with red-pilled influencers to swap promo codes in encrypted Telegram chats. He explains how to bypass Facebook algorithms that charge prohibitively high CPMs cost per mil, which is the advertising rate for 1,000 views.
How do you bypass that?
By running stealth campaigns disguised as fitness motivation that actually funnel users into what he proudly calls toxic masculinity seminars and book sales.
But eventually, if you get big enough, the mainstream will notice you, and they will try to cancel you.
But Riker doesn't seem afraid of this at all.
In fact, he has a whole strategy for weaponizing cancellation, which he calls outrage economics.
He outlines the law of backlash economics. In his view, being labeled problematic by a major media outlet or getting your book banned by Amazon is actually the single greatest marketing tool available today.
He points to a specific author, right?
An author who was kicked off Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing platform for terms of service violations. Within 24 hours, that author pivoted to Gumroad and instantly sold 10,000 copies directly to his audience because of the outrage.
Because they were told they couldn't have it.
Exactly. Riker's rule is simple. The louder the progressive establishment screeches about your book, the faster your sales climb. He teaches his authors that censorship isn't a barrier, it's a massive, free billboard.
He even has a highly controversial hack for manipulating the Amazon algorithm if you aren't lucky enough to get banned. How does that work?
This is wild. He advises authors to set up shell LLCs and use them to purchase 1,000 copies of their own book on launch day.
Just buy their own books.
Right. This massive sudden influx of sales triggers Amazon's automated bots to smell a viral bestseller, instantly catapulting the book to the #1 spot in categories like male empowerment or action thriller.
And this algorithmic boost then drives real organic sales.
He tells writers to simply deduct the cost of buying their own books as a marketing expense on their taxes, and then just sit back and watch local librarians melt down when the algorithm forces the book into their state-funded banned Books Week displays.
It's totally weaponizing the system's own code against itself.
It really is.
And finally, he touches on the reality of output. Because to make money, you need to publish constantly. He discusses ghostwriting and branding, specifically citing what he calls the Andrew Tate method.
This is where Riker completely drops the romantic, artistic notion of the solitary author laboring over a typewriter.
Just throwing it out the window.
He points out that while feminist critics spent years writing think pieces criticizing Andrew Tate's philosophy, Tate himself had an army of 17 ghostwriters churning out daily content for his Hustlers University series.
17 ghostwriters. And the brilliance or the audacity of it was that the intros to those ghostwritten modules literally bragged, "I didn't write this. I conquered the weakling who did."
Riker claims that leaked Amazon KDP contracts reveal that up to 55% of the top-selling authors in the alpha male and tactical thriller genres outsourced their actual writing to ghostwriters.
So writing the prose for Riker isn't about claiming authorial credit at all.
Not at all. It's simply a brand stamp on a product. It's about scaling and monetizing pure alpha energy.
And he focuses heavily on monetizing utility alongside the fiction too.
Yes, he notes market research showing that 89% of men aged 25 to 45 prefer to buy merchandise that is tied to a specific physical function.
So not just a t-shirt.
No, so he advises authors not just to sell a $15 paperback, but to sell $200 physical survival kits bundled with a signed copy of their book.
Bundling tactical pens, water purifiers, and fire starters with their anti-woke manifestos.
Gamify the launch. Make it an event. And he specifically advises them to skip registering for official ISBN numbers, joking that Big Brother doesn't need to track your underground literature.
It's a wildly comprehensive, aggressive blueprint for creating a completely parallel economy in publishing.
It really is.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today. We started this conversation with the metaphor of building a skyscraper with raw, unforgiving steel. Riker's book is fundamentally an attempt to forge a new generation of writers out of that exact same steel, violently rejecting the papier-mâché of modern sensitivity and HR culture.
And he leaves his readers with a final, highly provocative thought regarding the legacy of this movement.
What's the final thought?
He suggests that authors shouldn't just rely on digital platforms. He tells them to buy a heavy-duty, 50 caliber shaped USB drive, load it with their raw, unfiltered manuscripts, and literally bury it deep in the desert inside EMP-proof bunkers.
Bury it in the desert. Why go to such an extreme?
Because he anticipates what he calls a coming digital dark age. He warns that as AI models are programmed by Silicon Valley to rewrite classic myths into sanitized, polyamorous, vegan quests, the digital record of human history will be overwritten.
So he wants physical backups.
He believes these buried USB drives will be the only surviving artifacts of unfiltered masculinity. He wants future archaeologists digging up the ruins of our civilization to have undeniable proof that men once wrote with fire and blood, without trigger warnings, and without apologizing for their nature.
It really leaves you wondering, will a digital dark age eventually wipe out all this sanitized corporate literature, leaving only this guerrilla samizdat fiction buried in the sand as the true, unvarnished record of modern masculinity?
It's definitely something to mull over.
If you fit the profile of the audience we discussed today, and you want to dive into the tactical manual for this culture war, you really must check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy Masculine Writer's Blueprint by Conrad Riker.
And be sure to follow @Conrad Riker at Substack to keep up with his ongoing strategies for navigating and bypassing the modern publishing industry.
As always, thank you for listening to this deep dive. Make sure you like and subscribe to the show for more explorations into the most fascinating and provocative sources out there. Keep questioning the narratives, respect the structural integrity of your own foundations, and we'll see you next time.